Yes. So whenever, Ed, you want to...
We're live.
We're live? Oh, right. Well, I'm told that we're live, so Jeff Herzberg and myself, I'm Dave Kane, I'm the principal of Fort Senior High. We have been pretty much inundated with questions at times about what are the true admissions requirements. When we make changes in curriculum, are those courses going to be accepted by the colleges? With the change in schedule, are those things going to be addressed? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have a whole lot of faith in the high school principal. And so, he and I kind of put this together. I'm very fortunate to have Mark Fleshner and Bill Caffrey from Iowa State, Kristen Kangas from the University of Northern Iowa, along with Danny Schofield, who's also from the University of Northern Iowa, and Michael Barron, who is representing the University of Iowa. So we have all three Regents institutions represented here this evening, or this afternoon. And this is just going to, I think we're going to begin by just kind of having them discuss what the basic entrance requirements are at each institution, and then also talk about some of the exit requirements that might be fulfilled in high school prior to actually going to the university, so that they can avoid having to take a university class if they've taken certain things in high school. And then we have a wide variety of questions that have been sent to us. Or if you're watching online and you would like to submit some questions, if you could please go ahead and Twitter those to Jeff Herzberg, or actually send them via email to Jeff Herzberg, and we will go ahead and see if we can't get those questions asked. So at this time, I'm going to kind of turn it over to the Regents to become part of the audience, and if we could just begin by talking a little bit about the actual truth in terms of what does it take for me to get into your institution.
Well, I don't know if it would make sense for us to talk a little bit about what we...
Can we get those microphones turned on?
Real quickly, beginning in the fall of 2009, the Board of Regents passed a new set of freshman admission requirements that are known as the Regent Admission Index, or the RAI. By now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the RAI. In the process that we went through to come up with the RAI, there was an admission study team that was composed of representatives from each of the three regional universities and from the Board of Regents office. And essentially what we did was we went through mountains of data to try to identify those factors that really are the best predictors of success in our institutions. And what we found were that there were four factors that do the best job of predicting success. And those are the four factors that make up the Regent Admission Index. So ACT, percentile class rank, high school GPA, and then the number of years of core courses that the student completes in high school. And so we found a way to roll those four factors all up into a mathematical equation, so that when high school seniors apply for admission to any of our universities, they are assigned a Regent Admission Index score. And the Board of Regents stipulated that if that score is 245 or greater, and if the student meets the minimum high school course requirements for Regent institutions, then the student is automatically admissible to any of the three state universities. The Board of Regents also stipulated that if the student's RAI score is below 245, then each institution can decide as to how they wish to consider those students for admission. So that's the one area where we may differ a little bit on how we consider freshman applicants. But the bottom line is you have a 245 RAI or greater, and you meet the minimum high school course requirements, you are automatically admissible to any of the three state universities. So I'll just, maybe I'll stop there and let some of my colleagues add whatever they know.
I apologize.
We'll pause for our technical adjustments here.
All right. New with this. Good.
Do I have to say that all over again?
No.
Now, we heard you right up, you said, let me start by saying.
Good.
Bill refers to the fact that the second part, the Reduced Admission Index, the formula is one part of the admission requirement, and the other part are our core requirements that we expect high school students to have before we come. And that's the area where we are similar but with differences. So what I can address from the University of Northern Iowa is that we expect the students to have 4 years of English, 3 years of math. That math should include at least Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. We expect to take 3 years in the social sciences, 3 years in the sciences, with the expectation at least one of those years will be in a laboratory science, and then 2 years of electives. Generally, for you and I, most of the students will fill the 2 years of electives by taking foreign language. They take 2 years of Spanish or French or German or whatever the language is that your school offers, and by having a C- or better in their final foreign language class, they can also meet our graduation requirement in foreign language for a degree. So that is one of the things that was referred to as that started is there may be exit requirements that students can do while they're in high school. And for the University of Northern Iowa, the foreign language is one of those that could be fulfilled that way.
There's really very little difference between each of the three institutions, possible exception that University of Iowa has very specific patterns in natural science, biology, chemistry, and physics. We need 2 years, but we want at least one from physics and chemistry and one from biology, and the third unit or third or fourth unit students take over. I think it could be interesting to know. We probably have the University of Iowa the largest requirement for world language, as we refer to it now, or foreign language, that's referred to as some of the literature. And we're requiring 2 years of the same foreign language in high school for admission. Many of our degree programs are now requiring that students complete the equivalent of 4 years in high school. And we recommend students take 4 years of the same language in high school if that's available, because that will satisfy not only their English requirement but also their basic requirement from the University of Iowa. College of Engineering just asked for 2 years. College of Business has recently added a world language requirement. College of Nursing has a world language requirement. This is becoming a global economy, and even though we're right here in the middle of the country and the state of Iowa, there's still getting a little bit better.
Could you pull the microphone physically closer to you, please?
How about that?
Every little bit helps.
In my rock band days, it's called Eat the Mic.
So what's that?
Yes,
Well, let's double check it.
Hello?
This is way on. Would you like me to repeat any of that? I'm getting one yes.
I'm getting yes.
Thank you. The fundamental requirements, as Phil and Cindy, Christy have talked about, are the same. The University of Iowa does ask for more world language or foreign language. typically. We'd like for all students to take 2 years of the same foreign language in high school, and that would garner admission to the university, all other things being equal with the Region Admissions Index. But students who take 4 years of the same foreign language while in high school will satisfy not only the entrance requirement for the university, but the exit requirement for the majority of our degrees. And the College of Nursing is now asking for a world language. College of Engineering wants 2 years. The College of Business has now recently added world language as a requirement. I think this is in recognition of the fact that that we're in a global economy, and even if people graduate and work in the state of Iowa, that being multilingual is becoming an essential skill. There's a great web reference. You can get it on any of the websites for the universities and also from the Board of Regents. There's a chart called Building Your Future. This one happens to be on the back of a folder that's sent to every 8th grader in the state of Iowa, sent and distributed, through their schools, middle school or junior high, wherever that 8th grade, might be. It outlines for each of the 3 universities the minimum core course requirements, and where there are differences for a college rather than general admission, those are there as well. And then there is an optimum column, recommendations for success, which align with students going beyond the minimums in order to be well prepared to study at a regional university. And the data that we have suggests that the stronger the high school curriculum and the sustained throughout the senior year, the more likely the student is to have a successful transition through that first year and persist into the second and on to graduation.
Sounds like that mic is the one, and that's working, so let's keep doing that. And maybe repeat the question or something, but just to follow up, there's been some discussion in school districts about moving foreign language down to elementary and middle school levels. Maybe the earlier a student could begin learning foreign language, the better off they would be. But what might that do to high school credit? Or could a student take Spanish 1 in middle school or get the equivalent of Spanish 1 and then apply that to their high school transcript? Maybe you can repeat some of the questions so folks in the online world.
Does this one sound okay? All right. So the question was about students who might take foreign language prior to high school, and how would that impact the foreign language credit we give them once they're in high school. And I'll tell you how Iowa State handles it. I'm assuming it's the same at the other institutions, but I don't want to speak for them. So we see many instances when students will take, especially the first year of a foreign language in 8th grade, and then so when we receive the student's high school transcript, all we see is Spanish 2 in 9th grade and Spanish 3 in 10th grade. In cases like that, we will give the student credit for 3 full years of Spanish. So essentially what we're doing is we're just looking at the last year of foreign language that the student completed, and from that we determine how much foreign language credit we should give them.
Essentially that's the same at UNI.
Same for the University of Iowa. We see Spanish 2 and Spanish 3 and Spanish 4. We're going to assume Spanish 1 happened in middle school or at some earlier time. Certainly the school district has made a determination that that student was ready for something other than the first course when they enrolled in high school. So we're going to assume that those earlier courses.
Would that assumption hold true with math as well? If you see geometry and algebra, something that then they kind of output one.
Now the question is, will that assumption hold true for mathematics?
Does it, I would say. If it's an obvious sequential course, then it's the same principle. But if a student were to take biology in 8th grade, we have no way of knowing that occurred. So,
Plus it shows up on the transcript.
right. Yeah.
Our high school credits that are awarded to students who are when they both show up on the transcript, they're considered the same then?
Essentially, we would consider that the same whether they took it in 8 or took it in 9, as long as the one-year sequence of algebra.
Absolutely. The obvious advantage to the student that begins in an advanced track in middle school is that they've got an opportunity to add more on the other end. And that's especially for students that are looking at STEM fields, for example, and others, students that want to stretch themselves. They want to get into your calculus course, or your AP statistics class if you're offering that sort of thing. They get a benefit, I think, from starting early.
There are several schools that are moving towards integrated curriculum, and one of the first areas that they're trying to integrate are English and social studies. How are those courses looked upon then by the universities if they show up on a transcript, like a humanities or an American studies class?
Yes, integrated curriculum. We go by the SCED code, so maybe Phil can explain that a little bit better, but we have an ability at the Regents institutions to assign accountability to courses based on what they are. So if the content of the course is college prep and it falls in line with one of the 5 core subject areas, even though they might be integrated, they can definitely count toward core and toward the RAI.
Yeah, I think the operative there is that how the courses are coded by the school and their reporting of those courses to the state. And so that's a critical piece.
Well, currently, if you code something if you teach a humanities class, that has to be coded under English, even if it includes social studies instruction. There are no half English, half social studies schedules. So, how do you represent that in the transcript so that the colleges make sure that they understand what's going on?
Well, to be honest with you, everything is keyed by the SCED code. And as wonderful as the RAI has been for us over the last few years, probably the one aspect of it that has been the most confusing for the high schools is how do we figure out which courses count toward the RAI and which ones don't. And so if there's any one thing we'd want you to get out of this tonight, it's the fact that you control that based upon whatever SCED code you assign to the course. When we were in the process of coming up with the RAI, we realized that it would be logistically impossible for us to evaluate every course in every high school every year. And we realized there was really no need to do that because a classification system already exists that requires that you classify each of your courses. You send that data to the Department of Education. So we thought it would be best to just utilize that system that already exists. So what we would ask is that the high schools just simply assign whatever SCED code they think most accurately reflects the content of that course. And in some cases, if it's like a dual course where it's half English and half social studies or whatever, in many cases these courses will earn more than one Carnegie unit. And so in that case it would count more. So the key though is to assign the proper SCED code. The other thing I'll just mention real quickly, and this is something that I'm sure you don't know about because we're in the early stages of working on a project with the Board of Regents and the Iowa Department of Education, and the end result is we will be sending to every high school in Iowa a table that will show you, for example, the courses that are offered at Fort Dodge High School which count toward the RAI. And we will ask that the high school post this on their school's website so that your parents and your students, everybody is on the same page and they know exactly which courses count and which courses do not count. So our hope is that we might be able to send out a sample of these maybe in January, but we're not sure about that yet. So hopefully that'll help alleviate some of the confusion about which courses count.
I would also add to that, and I think everyone up here would echo this. Formulas are great as long as you have all the variables all in the right place, right? But sometimes there's an outlier or something that's an anomaly, or it just doesn't seem to fit. And I think that's when when schools should rely on the relationship they've built with admission staff at the three Regent universities and reach out to first perhaps to the individual that calls in your school, but they're traveling, they're busy, they're not always in the office. I'm pretty sure everyone that's sitting up here at this table would be happy to receive a personal call, and have actually received calls from curriculum coordinators, from actual classroom teachers, from principals, from school counselors, and we're happy to do that and to field those calls. Because if there's something that's just a little bit different and you're not absolutely certain, we're going to fully understand what you're sending us in the way of course descriptions and things of that kind. I think we would all want you to call, because we all want to find a way to accurately reflect the student's educational experience in a high school setting, and do our dead level best to make sure that we can match it up with our expectations for what it takes to be a successful student at our institution.
A question from Principal Brian Downing at Okoboji High School. He's wondering about how are you planning to handle, or how do you now, if you're accepting students from other states, transcripts based on competency and not the current unit or seat time that's recently been removed from the Iowa Code. Thinking about that yet?
I'm actually in meetings with through the College of Education at the University of Iowa with several school districts that are already moving down this path. Muscatine happens to be a school district that's pretty far down the competency-based education type of approach, and they've just begun to realize that there is an implication for what happens after high school. And then I just had a conversation 2 days ago with the principal at Solon High School, where they're taking the first step on the standards-based assessment and taking out things that in their view tend to inflate grades, and so parents are like homework and extra work and things of that type, but then thinking to do like some other schools in the state have done, putting in test-retest possibilities for students to be able to demonstrate and reach those competencies. So I think this is all very new, for us. We're not actually receiving a lot of transcripts that are competency-based, either standards-based assessment, which is, I think, philosophically linked to and perhaps can be a part of a competency-based education movement. The third piece that was not a part of this question that I also think is pretty critical, and I guarantee you enrollment managers and admission officers around the country have yet to think about this, because colleges haven't really been brought into the discussion on Common Core state standards and what's happening with the two national consortia, PARC and Smarter Balance. State of Iowa is a member of the Smarter Balance Consortium, and in 2014 there's going to be presumably some new assessments in the Common Core areas of communication, language arts, and mathematics. And what impact does that have, or might that have, on determining college readiness of students? And the schools are still struggling with if the student passes those tests in what we now call the 11th grade, is there any reason for them to stay in high school? These are all local control issues with school boards and things of that type, but there's a lot of that going on, and I actually think it's a little too soon to know. I know that 12 years ago, 15 years ago, the Regent universities had an ad hoc group of faculty from the three Regent institutions get together to begin to think about, could we express our core course requirements that were listed, we talked about earlier, in terms of competencies? What is it we really think students will know and be able to do if they live through this curriculum with this amount of seat time? And 15 years ago, that was a tough thing for university faculties to do. But I think the key to that is that we ought to be in dialogue with one another about that, and not allowing others to define this process. I think all of us would welcome discussion about this with any school district. I know I've talked to the people at the Department of Ed a little bit, and there's some good pilot programs going on out there, but I don't know that we know enough yet to really know how to answer that question.
Because there are pilot programs out there, are there instances where a student-by-student basis admissions requirements that are being looked at?
Yes, I think that, right now we're not seeing large numbers of students from even outside the state of Iowa that are presenting these kinds of records to us for review. We each have a way to individually review applicant records. And so when we see a student with a record that is kind of outside of what fits into the RAI process, the Region Submission Index process, then we put them through our individual review process. And so we're looking in a more holistic way at those applications. It's not as objective as the formula-based REI. It's much more subjective review.
Yeah, I would just add that that's exactly the way it works. That when the RAI was approved, the Board of Regents also stipulated that applicants that don't have all four of the factors that make up the RAI will simply be considered for admission on an individual basis. And that's what the holistic review process is all about, that Christy was describing.
Can you go back to the foreign language a little bit? You talked about, there's different areas where you have to have 2 years, 4 years. When a student comes in, is there a way for them to earn college credit clubbing out so that they don't have to take more, or they need to take more? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. At Iowa State University, if a student meets the foreign language entrance and exit requirements, that would be that they take 3 years of a consecutive language in high school. And then they will have met any entrance and exit requirements at Iowa State. So that's the student's prerogative to do that. If they want to do that through CLEP or through a post-secondary enrollment option or something like that, they're welcome to call our office or to go onto our website, meet with our staff to find out, because it is going to vary by program. All of our teacher preparation programs have that entrance-exit requirement. But a student in the College of Agriculture, for instance, would not have an exit requirement for language. So in terms of how they would do that through CLEP, we do advise students to contact the department that they want to study under to make sure that that's the right move for them. It's an investment in dollars, an investment in time, and we want to make sure that that would apply to their program. For students that are undecided about their major, we can pair them with undecided advisors. However, depending on the degree program that they choose, that CLEP decision or not CLEP decision can change their educational plan as they matriculate through the university. That's for Iowa State.
Yeah, the main thing to keep in mind is it is a competency requirement, and we've each kind of defined that a little differently. At UNI, it's across the board. All 100 or so majors that we offer, it's a 2-year requirement. So the competency can be demonstrated based on 2 years in high school, C- or above in the last term, or a CLEP exam, or oftentimes the community colleges in your area have the Spanish 1 and 2, and we see a number of students that meet it that way also.
For the student that takes 4 years of the same foreign language in high school, and they come to the University of Iowa, they can take advantage of the foreign language incentives program, take a placement examination, and if they place into the next course above, into the next level, then they will go ahead and take that course, and then we'll also give them 8 semester credit hours of college level work in that language, recognizing that what they've learned and achieved, in high school. And that's how I took your original question. Yeah.
And I would just echo that Iowa State offers a similar policy for foreign language placement for students that would like to continue in their foreign language studies.
At UNI, we do have the placement for those that are going to study further, so they can be placed. They don't have to start at the beginning level, they can be placed further. Our placement process, unlike what Mike described from the University of Iowa, does not give them credit in the earlier one. However, they can use something like the CLEP exam to actually get the credit.
Can I ask another question? You all have done a much better job of working with the community colleges as far as college classes transferring, not transferring. Can you talk about college English 1, 2, and the public speaking? As far as when kids come, do they need all three? Can they come in with parts and pieces? Does it depend on the major? Because I think that's a big misconception between, I know myself as a counselor and talking to kids and parents, I tell them all or nothing is kind of what I've been doing, so I'm curious to know what the answer is there.
At Iowa State University, English 1 and 2, 101 or whatever the 105, 106, those are required to graduate in every degree program at Iowa State University. The speech communications class, the fundamentals of oral, I believe it's called, is required or offered as a preferred recommended elective in many of our degree programs, but it is not required for all.
But if they came, like here at senior high, they took 1 or 2 of them and they don't have the third piece, or they've just taken 1, how does that work?
Whatever they've taken, we will accept that credit and they will get placed in the next course sequentially.
That's what I'm wanting to know about.
For UNI, it's a matter of completing both the 1 and 2 in the writing sequence at the community college. They get 6 hours of credit for that, but it fulfills one of our category 1A requirements. 1B is our speech requirement, and they would need a separate speech course. It could be public speaking or it could be introduction to speech. I see both of those titles at the community colleges. So to get to your question, it doesn't have to be a package like all or nothing. It can be the writing or the speech or both can be fulfilled.
But if they're going to take the English, they need to take both at the community college. We only have in one semester English requirement. To get the content, they have to take both semesters at the community college.
So if I'm hearing you right, if they took college English 1, that they didn't get the second one done when they got there, they would have to redo to get the all pieces that you want. Is that correct?
Yes, they would still need to take our English class when they got there because they don't have all the pieces. They would get credit, elective credit, for what they did, but they still have a requirement.
Gotcha.
Obviously, we're the outlier. At the University of Iowa, we have one course, rhetoric, which includes writing and reading and speaking. The advice really is for if students can get if they came to the University of Iowa right out of high school and took the one rhetoric course, then they're going to satisfy the distributional requirement, in communication and in speech. If they come to us with 2 courses from, say, the community college, right? And they're both in English, composition, rhetoric, whatever. Freshman English 1 and 2. But they lack the speech course. We have a specialized 2 credit hour speech class that they can take. That's how we do that. And our rhetoric courses, I think, for 4 credits, not 3.
Michael, I want to follow up on something you said about, because Principal Sean Holloway from Ransom Northwest Webster asked a question. Have colleges not been included in the conversation about the Common Core?
So the question is, coming from a principal, have colleges not been included in the conversation about the Common Core? For the most part, no. At least not enrollment and admission officers. Now, there are some faculty in colleges of education around the state that have been brought in sort of advisory roles and that sort of thing. But the state of Iowa, for example, has 2 official representatives to SmarterBound. And one is from a community college. And that individual is a non-voting member. And the other one is an appointee of Director Glass's operation at the Department of Ed. And he is the voting member. The Regent universities have a designated individual, Dr. Diana Gonzalez, who is the Chief Academic Officer for the Board of Regents office. And Dr. Gonzalez is actually working with the Department of Ed person and with the community college person to get university and college, public and private, and into this discussion coming from Iowa, but Iowa is one of X number of states that are a part of SmarterBound. So I know that I was a part of a national webinar that was put on by the Advocacy Center of the College Board, and another enrollment manager and I began to raise questions. This was actually a webinar for enrollment officers to introduce them to the Common Core state standards and some of the discussion that we hear are going on about that and how it might impact, how we might use the results of those assessments once they become available. And it was a small national audience that signed on for this, only about 350 people, and over 2/3 of them were K-12. So we really did not reach the audience we hoped to reach, and I think it's because they don't understand, the nature of it and how it might potentially impact. So some faculty members, yes, have been involved, but I honestly don't feel that people like me on the academic side of the house or on the admissions side of the house and enrollment side of the house, unless we're just doing our own reading or pulled into this process right now.
Many schools are moving away from the practice of class ranking. If you receive a transcript where the student's not ranked in your class, how is that addressed?
Well, at Iowa State, we handle it all basically the same way. When students submit their application for admission, they're asked to self-report their class rank. And we have a box that students can check that says, my school does not rank. And if a student checks that box, we will automatically estimate the student's class rank. And we have a formula that we use for estimating rank. It takes into consideration the GPA, the ACT composite score, and the amount of math and science that they'll complete by the time they graduate. So we estimate the student's rank, and we simply plug that into the student's RAI score. So we handle it all the same way.
We have somewhat of a similar process to Iowa State for unranked students. Same as Iowa State, they can check a box on their self-report indicating their school does not provide class rank. We then will also assign a class rank based on an alternative formula that we have used that our a couple of folks on campus came up with in our institutional research. We're only using 3 factors then instead of 4 factors in the other formula. Because it's not an officially approved formula, it's an in-house way of gauging where we believe the student is with their RAI score. That's what we use, and then that student is individually reviewed in the admissions process.
University of Iowa is a little different. You don't have a rank, we don't presume to give you one. I know how the internal processes were developed at the other 2 schools, and I think they're extremely valid. They've been normed and tested against student performance. I think they know exactly how that works, and it works for them. The issue is being fair to all students as much as possible. We have not taken when I say we don't presume to give a rank, that's not a disparaging remark about my sister institutions. They're doing what's right for them. The University of Iowa, we have long had a holistic review, individual review category. It's been it was on our application for 35 years. Where students can who don't exactly fit the mold have an opportunity to get into the non-cognitive stuff and to provide additional information. So we were already comfortable with this concept, and we've been watching and are quite well aware that ranking class for lots of reasons, usually associated with unfairly, as an unfair advantage or disadvantage to some students. In the college admissions process, usually one of the reasons that we hear why schools drop ranking class. But there are others. Be that as it may, probably 40% of the applications that come to the University of Iowa, and fully a third of those students who actually enroll didn't have a class rank and are reviewed holistically by our staff, and that's the professional part that comes into our staff knowing and understanding the school, how students from that high school perform. Typically, at our university, in the past, it would be an honest statement to tell you that test scores and grade point average and the number of courses students take in that core, especially if they go beyond the minimums, those things take on greater weight. But we also allow for personal statements, and we allow for school recommendations, teacher recommendations, or school counselor recommendations, that sort of thing. Students can present those things. We choose to go about this holistically, calling on the relationship that we have with the school, the knowledge that we have with the high school, and how students have performed there, in the past, to try to make an admissions decision, as opposed to creating an alternative or proxy for rank, as the other two schools have done. Our research has shown that admissions decisions that we've made on a holistic basis for those schools that have dropped rank have tended to produce students who perform at or above the same level that the students did from those high schools back in the day when they had a rank and we compute an admissions index. And that would be our goal, is to be able to continue to fairly represent the achievement of students at a particular high school and how that relates to being successful on our campus.
Along those same lines, I had a question about some schools weight transcripts. Are weighted and unweighted transcripts then, in terms of calculating GPA, are they treated the same or differently?
Well, at Iowa State University, if a student presents a weighted class rank or a weighted GPA, we will factor that into the RAI just like we would a non-weighted. And we even have applicants from schools that present two ranks, a weighted and a non-weighted, and two GPAs. And our policy is to simply use whatever one benefits the student the most. Now, I need to qualify that just a little bit, because when we compute the student's RAI score, the maximum GPA that a student can have is 4.0. So if a student has a 4.9 GPA or whatever, it just gets plugged in as a 4.0.
Same that you and I.
I attended a math conference last summer at Iowa State that was for math teachers and counselors. And they talked about a math assessment that all new students will be taking. Could you give us more information on that?
The math assessment at our campus, and I believe it's the same assessment, is called the ALEX assessment. And I think our math educators would prefer the term assessment rather than a placement exam, because it is an assessment of the student's skill and ability in a number of mathematical levels. I can tell you that at Iowa State University, prior to a student coming to new student orientation, many of our students most of our students will be required to take the ALEKS placement assessment, again, depending on the term you're familiar with. And it basically provides a student the ability to take the assessment to see how they do. And then there are also some tutorials that a student can come back through and they can retake the exam. This is used for placement into a number of the mathematics courses at Iowa State, and I would defer to my colleagues to describe how their placement works on their campus.
Is this something the student does totally on their own then?
At our university, we tell them to take it. It's part of the communication that is sent to students who have accepted their offer, paid their deposit, and plan on attending the student orientation. So it's in the mail and email that is sent to the student.
Yes, but you and I were using the same assessment. ALEKS is ALEKS, and we use it for all of our majors, for all of our freshmen. And they need to take it prior to coming to orientation. They are sent information at the point that they're committing to the university to do it. They can do it. It's online. They can go online. If they are not satisfied with what it's telling them about where they should be starting in their mathematics sequence at the university, there are modules they can study to get themselves up. It tells them exactly what it is they need to do. And then they can study those online and go back and test again, just like Maura described. So we really encourage the students to do that earlier. One of the things we're seeing, and I'll put this out on the table, one of the things we're seeing is those students that are not taking mathematics in their senior year are not very happy with where it's telling them they are. Okay? So if we could make a recommendation, it's to take mathematics in your senior year. So, because you're not going to take this until probably April, May of your senior year. So while it's fresh, while you've still been exercising that part of your brain, we would encourage the students to do that. And then our advisors will use that for helping the students place into, it's not really placing, but advising into where they start. Our whole goal, we want the students to be successful and to start at a level where they can be successful and not end up trying something, jumping into a course because, I'll use this as an example. I took pre-calculus in high school, therefore I'm ready for calculus 1. Okay? They get into calculus 1, and oh my, I'm not ready. Now they have to withdraw from that class. They've lost a semester. They've got to go back the following semester, maybe to brush up, get the pre-calculus. And so it's a year later before they can start the calculus 1. So the whole idea, and I think it's an intent of all three of us, I don't want to speak for them, but we want the students to be successful to start where they can have that success.
I can't really add much to that. I think that's certainly the way that ALEKS is used, on our campus as well. I can tell you though that we pay for that test in terms of that first administration, and for the student, and we authenticate them to the system, so that's how they're going to get into it. We do ask that they take it before they come for first year orientation, or they're going to. We say we require it. I mean, how much is really required these days? So that's what we tell students. The other thing I would add though is the modularity of this particular program. A student goes through this and finds that there's one segment of mathematics that they just are not up to par on, but they're fine with everything else. They can go back and do a module on just that item, and then go back and retest on that in order to then add to the other segments that they've already successfully completed. I mean, one of the problems with a lot of assessment and with some of the issues that we're talking about is the student, missed a 3-week segment because the curriculum was just organized differently. And then they've got to go back and take a whole course in order to finally get back up to the point they're going to pick up that 3-week segment of topics, which is might be critical to the next course in its sequence, particularly in mathematics. So now you know how this works. So that's one of the nice things about ALEX is that it holds as completed those parts that the student actually knows and is able to perform in at this point in time, and it gives them a chance to do the tutorial through the modularity of that program and then retest on just that and add that successful score to the other successful scores. And so this is a process that actually for some students could take place all summer long before they ever get to it. So when they get there in the fall, they're fully ready with that skill set already in hand.
One of the other things they discussed in terms of that conference, in terms of the place of exam, is there was a number of students that were scoring pretty low on that exam, and that they were then being placed in remedial type math classes that they don't receive credit for. Could you just make some comments on that?
The question was about if students do poorly on ALEX and they are assessed and placed into lower level, potentially remedial math classes. You're asking us to comment on that. That is a reality, unfortunately. So students, when they take ALEX, they should take it seriously. They should make the time to take the exam, and it has real implications. So if a student takes ALEX and they are placed into a remedial math course, that would certainly be the recommendation of our academic advisors and counselors at the university. Now, students can try to petition or try to say they may know better and that they're ready for a higher level class. And then we get to the example that Christy gave just earlier of they're not. And so part of this is ALEX is a tool that helps us try to help our students be successful. And if they want to not listen, they're going to find themselves backtracking potentially. But also, I think that can create a little bit of a contentious relationship if the student isn't understanding their abilities and or maybe not getting assistance or going back to those modules to try to be more successful. So that is a reality of some remedial math courses if a student is just not doing well on ALEX.
With the increase of online courses that many of our students are taking, how is that impacting their applications? Are there things that educators should think about or students even should think about?
Are you referring to college level online courses? Okay.
Or, I mean, it could be high school too now that we've got many of those companies working stuff down. Either way.
Well, we're not particularly concerned about the mode of delivery as we are about the content of the course. So as long as if it's a high school level course and it has the appropriate sched code, then obviously we're going to count it toward the RAI. If it's a college course and it falls into one of the 5 subject areas, English, math, science, social studies, or foreign language, then in all likelihood it will be counted toward the RAI. But the fact that it's online is not a big factor.
I'd also add that generally we don't know. Unless your transcript tells us that this particular course is online, we don't know. And generally college transcripts do not tell us that. So whether the high school tells us in one way, generally we're not going to know that. It is, if it's, I'll use an example, if it's Introduction to Psychology, it's Introduction to Psychology.
There's really no difference in what happens now with concurrent enrollment, PSEO, or 2080 agreements. We don't know. Community colleges don't mark those on their transcripts. We can figure it out if you've got it on your transcript and if they got it on their transcript. And it's actually in the same semester and it was pretty close to the same title and description. We kind of figured out how that went, but the Iowa code provides for that course to count both ways. But we don't know that. We don't know the mode of delivery, from the high school transcript. And I agree, the same thing is true with online.
I had a question from one of my students actually earlier. They took the SAT and they took the ACT, and they're not satisfied with their score, but their score was fairly high. If they retake it, score is used? The better of the two, the most recent? Which of those scores? I mean, is it an advantage if I'm fairly high, but I don't want to slip back and get a lower score, take the ACT again?
That's an individual student choice. But I can tell you that we use the score that most advantages the student in the process. If the highest score from a single test administration, let me underline that. If the highest score from a single test administration was the very first one they took, and they were a sophomore in high school, and they'd taken it 5 more times, and they never got a higher score, we're going to use the highest score they send to us. The one thing that we do not do at the University of Iowa is that we do not superscore. We won't take a subscore from one test and then a subscore from another test a year later, and that's higher, and add up all of the highest scores from all of the different test administrations. There are universities that will, but that's not what we do. So, I think if a student is not satisfied with their test score, and in consultation with their school counselor and their and their parents, it's something they want to spend the money and they want to do, they want to retake the test. I realize this can become an obsession for some students, and we're not recommending that. But I think if a student wants to advantage themselves in some way, or they believe they are going to be advantaged by having multiple scores, that's fine. This one is tricky. There's 4,000 colleges in the country, and about 1,800 of them are 4-year colleges. And there are some colleges that I know of, usually private, that want you to send them every score, and they average. But then they tell you they do that. We don't do that. We take the highest score from a single test administration and use that.
And the policy Mike just described is the same at Iowa State.
And that you and I.
I guess I have one more question, and certainly we can ask when we need to wrap up here in a little bit. If the school district is wanting to do something innovative and it doesn't fit inside the box, what is the best process for them? And I think you mentioned it earlier, but sometimes when we look at making changes, some of the pushback is, well, that won't let our kids get into this place or that other place. And obviously we have a right to be concerned about that, but is it just contact you directly, work with someone in your department?
Yeah, the short answer is to just contact us directly. I get calls like that from lots of school districts throughout the year, and they want to do something a little outside the box, but their main concern is how will it impact our students' access to your university. So it's good to just give us a call, and we'll work it through with them.
I'd also add that generally that's exactly what happens. Just give us a call, and we'll try to understand it better so we can give you an appropriate answer. If there's something that comes to us that we don't feel like we're ready to give an answer, there is what we call an admissions study team, and we sometimes bring those questions to the group, and all 3 of us are represented, and we come together and we puzzle through it, gather whatever information we need to answer our questions, and then we'll come back with a decision. But we're not against innovation. We recognize a lot of times that moves us ahead.
The operative that I think happens here is that we've all received these questions. We get them from school board study committees. We get them from superintendents. We get them from principals. And the one I think I mentioned early on from Solon, when the principal was called and said, I really need to talk to you about this because our parents are very concerned that we're going to the standards-based assessment process. And that's going to affect our grades. And he said, we're doing everything we can for it to not impact, the achievement level of our students. We just want to accurately reflect achievement, and we want to measure achievement only by the things we think are valid for measuring achievement. But we're not trying to change the distribution of grades. And so I think most of the impetus for concern comes from parents, oftentimes, and sometimes from students, is that it's going to impact what comes next. Which would be some form of post-secondary education, essentially. So the conversation is critical, and important, and you can't bug us enough on that. You can't bug us too much on that. I should put it that way. I mean, if the school district is really considering moving in some direction and they want a response from one or all three of us, they can get it. You know, if we're have enough information that we can, as Christy said, actually respond in an adequate way, then we will. And if we don't, we do have to say. And so we're really quite sincere about that. This is really what we want people to do.
There's been a lot of press about moving away from grades towards standards-based grading. Have there been conversations in your offices about how you're going to handle a transcript that comes with standards-based grading on it, not the typical A through F?
Well, and I would say we haven't seen that manifest itself yet. We haven't had to cross that bridge yet, I guess. And I'll go back to what we said earlier. When the RAI was approved by the Board of Regents, the stipulation was that if an applicant doesn't present all four of the factors, then the institution will just review the student on an individual basis. But I suspect if this becomes a big statewide trend, then I'm certain that the Board of Regents will want to review the freshman admission requirements to the 3 state universities. But we're not there yet.
We receive a lot of out-of-state applications, and in some of those environments, we've had portfolios presented instead of grades. Not even really a transcript, just a portfolio of these are things the student has done and is capable of doing, and those are pretty interesting to go through. But when you get into holistic review, that's what you expect. If it becomes a systematic, if it becomes embedded in Iowa code, for example, or if more schools are moving in this direction under the umbrella of the current code that we have, Bill's exactly right. We're going to have to take that under consideration. And so the best thing is no surprises. Same thing that you tell your own students, right? Yeah, and maybe even your teachers. And the teachers are telling the principals, no surprises. Please, no surprises. So dialogue and conversation. I think admission and enrollment offices at regional institutions are good gateways for lots of things. And if we're not the right individual to offer an opinion on some form of curricular change or grading change or something of that type that's being considered, we know who to go to and to recommend. My guess is you already do know that, where to go with that. But we're also good gatekeepers in that sense, in that we can point people in the right direction and pick up the right kind of resources for a discussion.
Scott, one more question.
Has social media, because of the use issues, whatever, is that playing? Will it play any part of students coming to your institutions?
No, we don't when students apply for admission, we don't check them up on social media. With 20,000 applications a year, it's just logistically not possible to do that. We get asked that a lot. But there are instances when we hire student volunteers to give campus tours or to be on panels like this or whatever. And in those instances, yeah, we do check on the students to make sure that they would be good representatives for the institution, but not in the admissions process.
And I would agree, we don't take the time to do that in the admission process. It may come up in other instances after they're a student, where we're trying to hire them to do something or bring them into one of our volunteer groups that work for the group. And I know that all three of us use social media in recruitment and in what we would call yield activities for the admitted students in different ways. It's the mode of communication the youth are using. And so we try to meet them where they're at. But as far as in the actual application and admission process, we don't have the time. That would take a lot of time to do that.
I'm going to augment that just a touch, because there have been a handful of cases where someone, oftentimes from the school where the student attends, has contacted other offices and said, before you allow this student to enroll, I think you ought to check them out. And so the school official comes to our staff and says, we think you ought to check out this student that's going to our school because we think there's some sketchy stuff there. Yeah, we might go look, but it's not a part of the admission requirements. But it could get turned over to the dean of students once they enroll. So this would be rare. This is really an outlier. This has happened a couple of times during the past year, and so it wouldn't be a complete answer to your question without throwing that in. It's I will tell you that I am. You can't be in this business as long as we have, and I've been in this business for 43 years. And say that, you've seen it all, because you haven't seen it all. And I can just say that some of the things that students are posting on the Facebook page for the class of 2017 or 2016, whenever they're being admitted for, I hope they haven't friended their parents.
What kinds of number of enrollment? I'd just be curious about enrollment, and when you say you have that many applicants, what's your percentage of through students, or what can you accept? And just a quick, how's enrollment doing? Up, down?
The enrollment's doing quite well in Iowa State. We have 31,040 students this fall, and our numbers for next year are running ahead of where they were at this time last year. So we're really in a growth mode, that's for sure.
UNI is a little over 12,000 students, and our enrollment is down this fall. But as far as we're looking to next year, what our applications are going to is a very positive picture for next year.
Yeah, it's not an arms race, so we have 31,498 students at the University of Iowa. Until the president was trying to find two more, so that it would be 31.5, but it was too late. The deadline had passed. Our entering class, we would like to have around 4,500, but every institution at this table will admit every qualified Iowan who applies and wants to come. And we will enroll them, whatever number that is. And so there's not any quota system or whatever. The University of Iowa would like to have an entering class of around 4,500, but if that grew a little bit, that would be fine. And I can tell you that like the other two, we have a double-digit increase in applications for next year over this year. I don't know that will materialize in double-digit growth in enrollment. I kind of doubt that. But it's that's kind of where we are. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Good.
All right. Thank you very much. And
Well, thanks for putting this on.